guys, it's Monday. That means one thing. Metagame Monday is on the cards. Before we get into things, let me quickly remind you what you can find on my Metafy, among other things. My own premium stuff here, updates to Reanimator, how to beat Reanimator, my Grixis Cutter deck, my Jeskai Wizards deck. This is just, some of the stuff you can find over there. And then what I'm the most proud about is these guest primers. So we have Mystic Forge from Death from Above. We have Martyr Energy from Morsa. We have Sneak and Show by JPA, Cradle Control by Newton, and then, of course, Breakfast by Larson. Note that this article has a few months, it's a few months old and will be updated soon. If this sounds like anything for you, head over there, start your Booksmart Baron membership, use ECO50 for 50% off, and let's get better while having fun. That's essentially what my content is about over here. So with all that being said, let's get into things here. If you're an Eagle Eye, you already noticed that I'm featuring 48 decks here instead of 40. So, of course, we have our 5 Legacy Challenges on Magic Online, but then we also have the top 8 from my Eco-ternal Weekend Legacy Edition that I hosted over the weekend. I was over the moon. Players were having a fun, very, very fun time. I think the total was 51 players. The tech ran smooth. Everything was just incredible. People seem to be having, good banter, good camaraderie, just all of that cool stuff alongside the competition. That's basically everything I want to achieve in Magic, is the top of the top when it comes to competition, and then also just having fun, getting better, and just looking at every, obstacle as a challenge. So my members certainly delivered in that department. So I'm super happy, and I'm very, very excited for Vintage around 3 weeks from now, where I'll also be giving away a painting. So don't forget that the winner of this tournament took home a painting that they are now going to cooperate with Kaisawa Tarix to make the exact painting that they want. I'll make sure to keep you guys updated when that one is finished and shipped over to the lucky winner. Congrats to Mayhem DJ, Brandon Watson, who took it down with his Mystic Forge deck. So let's look at the first pile here. That's going to be the winning decks of the 5 challenges plus Eco-ternal Weekend. So we can start with Mystic Forge. Brandon basically crushed everybody en route to the title. Mystic Forge is a super dangerous deck when it's in small numbers in the metagame. So now it's like 3 out of 48. Just imagine it was like 10 out of 48, 12 out of 48, right? Then all of a sudden, people know how to play, they should play 3 or 4 consigns. They should play a little bit more null rod. They will get creative with, some random tech like Void Mirror or whatever the case may be. But for now, with Mystic Forge, that it's just so annoying, the percentages that it's on. So it's so hard to justify going all in on beating it during sideboarding. Another challenge winner here is Mono Red Prison. And when you look at it, Mono Red Prison was super popular during the week as a whole. Not in my tournament, but in the challenges. So I don't know. It feels like Mono Red Prison is this kind of deck that kind of comes and goes. With these numbers, next time they're going to be facing more people fetching basics, more Hydroblasts, more negations, more diversified mana suites, so Chalice just doesn't kill the opponent, and that kind of stuff. That's usually how the cookie crumbles, but let's try and get back and see if I'm right next week. Another deck that won a challenge was Jeskai Wizards. So not my version of the deck, but more of the version that I think Gibetta is the name, has been pioneering. Some other people are picking up this deck. I can also see it on whenever I record with that deck and upload footage of Jeskai Wizards. People just love that kind of magic, right? Just hang around, answer the opponent's stuff, turn the corner, profit, right? So let's put this in the control pile. Then good old Sensei INF won a challenge with Dimir. I was about to say Dimir Ninjas. It wasn't Dimir Ninjas. It was just Dimir Tempo. Dimir Tempo is just this default deck that if the metagame is predictable, it's incredible, and then if the metagame is unpredictable, for instance, when you saw the green creature decks and the white creature decks pop up, you're like, then you can be in trouble, right? If there's Nadu Elves, if there's Cradle Control, if there's Mardu Energy, if there's Death and Taxes, you kind of need your combo decks to prey on a little bit. You need to play some red tempo decks where you're firmly ahead because of, the three black creatures, Bowmasters, Nethergoyf, and Baragoyf. And then if all of that comes together and your sideboard is good enough, you can take down a challenge. Then we have 2 copies of Reanimator taking down challenge each. Not exactly surprising. I will say the number is down from last week. Remember, we are looking at 48 decks here, so 11 out of 48 is smaller than the other weeks, or most other weeks essentially, where Reanimator has converted well above its metagame share. So let's imagine Reanimator's at 20% deck in Legacy, and it's converting 30% into top 8s. Of course, it's doing really well. So let's put that here in the pile. Tons of Reanimator here. People are still kind of undecided on a list. Some have Bowmasters, some had Voidwalkers. Of course, Negation is getting see more and more play in the main deck, which is obviously great against the uptick of Chalice of the Void and these combo decks. So yeah, Reanimator is for sure here to stay, and it's only a matter of who can find the best version that is the best in the mirror while also not giving up too much against the field when it comes to Eternal Weekend. I feel like this is kind of the talk of the town here. If you're a Reanimator player, of course, if you're not a Reanimator player, you're happy that they're kind of diluting their deck. Now you just need to make sure that the hate cards or the cards they're using in their flex slots, they don't actually hurt your deck, because then you're just doing them a big favor, right? So some positioning there to fight for. Dimir Ninjas netted a top 8. Then this was also in the hands of INF. So INF showcases a little bit of Japanese culture here and Japanese mastery as well. Taking a sweet top 8 slot with a cool deck, like cool tier 2 deck that's always lying in the bushes to be on brand with the Ninjas. Then there was another sweet version of Is It Tempo, which I didn't know how to, symbolize here, but I think highlighting Counterbalance as a key card is decent. So essentially, if you play Counterbalance in your Is It deck, you're basically saying, I want to have a leg up against other Ponder Mirrors, but I'm not willing to splash another color for it and use, Bowmasters or whatever the case may be. That way, you're better against, Blood Moon or lands, Recurring Wastelands. You can sit on your basic island and basically play your whole deck. We've talked about this before, the advantages of Is It versus Dimir. Sweet one to see, very polarized card to play in the main deck Counterbalance. It's either the best card in your deck or the worst card in your deck. But it being blue, I guess, not bad. I like it. Couple of Is It decks with Core Steel Cutter in it. Cutter has more or less taken over from Questing Druid when it comes to this, 2-drop engine, card advantage, diversifying your threats type of slot. Just the fact you don't have to play your Tropical Island, I think, is a pretty big plus. Cutter is a card that beats a stack of spot removal. Cutter is a card that's good against Blood Moon and Chalice. And just checks a lot of very, very good boxes in the field. That deck still has issues handling a Baragorth. I've come up with my solution for that, splashing a couple of Underground Seas with some sideboard removal spells. But yeah, people are trying to get along with Unholy Heat, leaning more on Daze, Brazen Borrower, that kind of stuff. Then we have Dimir Tempo here. So it's kind of interesting to follow the trend of this deck. My current configuration is 4 Nethergoyf, 4 Tameo, just down to 2 Dazes with 3 spell bombs in the main. You see all sorts of numbers going on here. But it's basically between those, whether you cut a Brazen, whether you play a black removal spell on top of Push, whether you play 3 Tameos, whether you play 3 Nethergoyfs, that type of deal. So essentially, this deck is messing around with around 5 slots in the main deck and around 5 slots in the sideboard. I even saw a version here. One of those is actually Kaito-less, but it's still Dimir Tempo, right? So where that player basically said that Kaito is the flex slot that you can basically fiddle around with. When you're making that decision, I guess you're hedging against games going somewhat short, where Kaito is a card that welcomes the games going long. So definitely some priorities there. Mystic Forge, 3 copies. We already talked about this deck. Let's move on to Doomsday. Doomsday, fan favorite deck that does well from time to time. When you're playing Doomsday, I think it's important to understand that if Mystic Forge and Eldrazi is trending and blue decks are generally running like 3 consigns, you probably have to change your win cons to Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. But that's just why it's cool, right? So let's say you're a dedicated Doomsday player. Then at that point, it's not really an option to just, let me play something else. It's more, how can I tweak this deck to be as competitive as possible against the field? And yeah, I always respect that hustle, but you know that if you've followed Metagame Monday for a while. Cephalid Illusionist here symbolizes Cephalid Breakfast, which is on a bit of an uptick. At some point, it was just like, nobody could buy a win with this deck, except if your name is Johan Larsson. So that has changed. More and more people are putting up results. I even think it won 2 challenges last week, and it's kind of sitting here. I mean, 2 out of 48. That's not bad. Like, that's really strong for a deck like Breakfast. Breakfast is catching a little bit of heat from, Reanimator being the deck to beat. Breakfast is hoping that Orcish Bowmasters doesn't see too much play, so this is kind of a bad news, right, from the Dimir tempo side. And but other than that, this is a deck that it's just awesome to play, and it can put your opponent in a tough spot. Next up is the creature category. So whether I would put Eldrazi there, who knows, right? But I decided to go for these. So we have Newton's favorite deck here, Cradle Control, putting a single copy into the top 8. I think this deck is still a deck that people need to study a little bit more to understand. Are we building the bird? Are we building a key creature? What are we actually doing with our, let's say we have a hand with 1 removal spell, right? Then we have Bant Nadu. Bant Nadu is another one of these where the overall share of the deck is super low, but it can always do well, especially in the hands of capable pilots. So whenever there's like a showcase or Eternal Weekend or some of the bigger stuff, I feel like this deck is an actual player in the metagame, and then in a challenge metagame, which I've been covering for, I don't know, 8 months or something, it's not really that big. But yeah, sweet deck, plows, cantrips, forces, and an annoying 1-2 punch. Couple of blue-based painter decks also did well. One was trying to go a little bit bigger with Pinnacle and Kappa Cannoneer, and then the other one is my version of Dimir Painter. There's a video coming out with that deck during this week. It was played by Vintage, Mr. Vintage. I'm actually level 1. He played in my tournament, and he top 4'd, and he had a whale of a time. He did say he drew exceptionally well. My favorite thing about the deck is for sure the sideboard Baraglyphs. So definitely go check that deck out if you're a blue painter enjoyer and would love a good plan B against, hate cards. Then single copy of Nadu Cradle. Nadu Cradle is a deck that's trying to capitalize on the relatively low share of combo decks and leaning on the Collector Oof, I guess, for most of the combos. Okay, well, I botched that one, so unsure how I can undo that. Okay, well, there's that one. So let's try and finish the thought here. This deck is in trouble if you see more, sneak attack, if you see more Doomsday, if you see more, just Dark Ritual combo in general. But I think that's totally reasonable. I think that deck is cool, and yeah, it's a good flavor of creatures. And then when people figure out, oh, wow, we have to play sweepers, that deck is probably in trouble. But let's see when that is. I'm trying to organize these cards. So we have lands and that one. And I was going to talk about these. Let's hope I don't skip too much stuff here. Let's move on to we can go to the control pile here. So control, we already talked about the Jeskai deck, and then there was a couple of cool blue-white decks around Quantum Riddler. So this deck is trying to use Failure to kind of make sure the Riddler stays in play. This is a very potent 1-2 punch. You end step the Failure, you warp the Riddler, you get to keep the Riddler. So that's kind of cool. And then it played some other creatures. I believe it played a Containment Priest to try and combo with Failure. It played like main deck Consign to Memory, which is live against the field. And it's also, just good with Failure, acting as a removal spell. And yeah, that was just pretty cool. Pretty cool to see. It was a back to basics strategy even. Next up, the Chalice decks here. Eldrazi still there, hurting a little bit from Mystic Force's success, hurting a little bit from, Blood Moon seeing more and more play. But Eldrazi is a powerful option. Puts on pressure, plays Chalice, has K command. And yeah, I think that deck is cool. I will say, if you're trying to cover enough ground with your colorless sideboard, you can sometimes be in trouble. And now, actually, the big surprise for me, usually Blood Moon is like 1 to 3 copies here in my graphics, but this time 7 copies out of 48. That is a lot. So a lot of players wanted to turn on Blood Moon people, a lot of players wanted to Chalice people, and a lot of players wanted to just have some aggressive, good tools, Bombardier, Pyrogoyf, and then just some consistency in Fable. So this deck is currently a little bit split between whether you should run an Ursa Saga package or not. I guess it's consistency versus upside. I like the Saga package mainly because it gives me more access to a Soul Guide Lantern. It gives me games where, I get forced twice and I sit there, but now I have 4 lands instead of, you know, 4 sagas to draw instead of 4 normal lands, or 4, you know, double-faced cards that don't do all that much. So I actually like Saga. I can see it's a little less consistent, but I actually think the deck needs help when it comes to getting forced a few times, or hydroblasted, or consigned, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I'll be monitoring the development of that deck. Last pile here is the big mana pile. So Sprouts is back with posting a top 8 with lands. The reason why I'm grouping these together is usually, you know, Wasteland is good against them, Blood Moon is good against them, Price of Progress is good against them if that's something you want to play. The blue Cloud Post deck looks super interesting. Now they're basically a Force of Will deck with stock up, and it's playing a bit more of a Chalice of the Void game. So the deck is a bit different these days, but I think it looks good, looks powerful. It's operating on an axis that is hard to prepare against. It is, however, hurting a little bit from, you know, consigned to memory being needed elsewhere in the metagame. Lands, you always want to look for, you know, how greedy are people's mana bases, how many plows are seeing play versus how many bolts or fatal pushes. So even just a development like the blue-black tempo deck being the favored tempo strategy, that's good news for lands. Lands can be built, so you have, you know, Reanimator under control. Lands can, with Force of Vigor, punish, you know, Blood Moon effects and stuff like that. So I think lands is still doing great. Lands is basically keeping an eye out on the combo column here with, you know, decks like Mystic Forge and Doomsday being tough matchups. So yeah, I'm sorry about the misordering. I fat-fingered and clicked the random button at the wrong time, but I think we got there in the end, covering this week of Legacy. It looks like in the weeks to come, we get great mileage out of Hydroblast, we get great mileage out of Pyroblast, we get great mileage out of Force and Negation. So those are certainly cards you can consider if your plan is to take down your next Legacy tournament. That is for sure my plan. So yeah. As always, I appreciate you hanging out, and I hope to see you back on the channel soon.